Good evening and welcome to the Greg Thompson Sports Show. This week we will whip around the NFL Week 14 action and tell you all the games that impacted the playoff chances of all teams, especially our Buffalo Bills. We will start with none other than the Thursday night special where we got a double dip of goodness. The New England Patriots upset the Pittsburgh Steelers, not only messing up their chances at drafting a generational quarterback to try to be the next leader in New England, but immensely helping the Buffalo Bills' chances. The Steelers now lost back-to-back games to two-win teams. They were 7-4. They now lost to the Cardinals, and the Patriots fall to the same record as the Buffalo Bills at 7-6. We saw some early flashes from Bailey Zappi. We actually saw a really good Ezekiel Elliott game, one of his best games, a game that I'm not sure he had that much in him left over here. And just a really, really rough, ugly game from Pittsburgh. They actually had a chance down the stretch to be able to get back into and win this game. Multiple opportunities there, but just weren't able to get it done. And the New England Patriots hold on for a critical win for the Buffalo Bills. Again, reminding you that even when we look at many of the games on the schedule, you can't take everything for granted of who's going to win or not win with the Vegas favorites. This was a really, really big one for the Bills to win. A great way to start the week. Another that we saw here, no real change for the Bills, but an interesting one in the NFC South. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers won a shootout back and forth with the Atlanta Falcons. An entertaining but ugly game, a game that made sense that got this. We'll see another one here in a moment that ended up being a three-way tie in the NFC South. So the Falcons dropped to 6-7. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers come up to 6-7. Some awesome catches by Drake London. Really, really impressive game for him, but unfortunately for not. And that matches up with New Orleans Saints beating the Carolina Panthers 28-6, a game that was never all that close or entertaining. They floated around a little bit. Carolina had one possession where they had the ball down by 8 and a chance to be able to make something of it, but in the fourth quarter, the Saints pulled away. All three teams are now tied at 6-7 in the NFC South. A little bit interesting there to watch down the stretch. Another game with huge ramifications for the Buffalo Bills. The Cincinnati Bengals, led by Jake Browning, beat the Indianapolis Colts 34-14. Just a dominant game. The Bengals defense really showed up big here, brought the Colts back down to earth. They had been winning a lot of games that just made no sense and had not been really, checking out, but they kept finding a way to win. This is now one that we talked about in the last couple of weeks where I'm basically betting that the Bengals can't continue to win with their schedule. They have a bunch of really tough games coming up down the stretch here, and I think that they're going to struggle to be able to get additional wins. So I was betting on the fact that they could go 7-6. They have the tiebreaker over the Bills, but their remaining 4 games of the Vikings, the Steelers, the Chiefs, and the Browns, that I don't think they're going to be able to go the 4-0 or 3-1 that we need the Bills to go. The Bills still need to accomplish that, but I don't think they're going to be able to for that tiebreaker to matter. So I will take the win over the Colts as a benefit to knock the Colts back to 7-6. There's now multiple teams tied at 7-6. We'll get to that here in a moment. So that one was a big, I think, a benefit, but statistically didn't make a huge difference. It just gave the Colts their 5th loss. A similar game that could have done that was the Cleveland Browns against the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jags did everything in their power to give this game to the Browns. They had a ton of opportunities, multiple ugly turnovers, 3 Trevor Lawrence interceptions, broken coverages that gave up big plays to the Browns, but the Browns find a way to win. This was probably the one game that could have gone the Bills' way that didn't today. The Jaguars get a loss that puts both teams at 8-5. With those two teams at 8-5, the Browns stay a game ahead, are firmly in the playoff race, and looking pretty comfortable. I think that they're in a position that I don't expect them to gag away their lead. They're at 8-5. They need 2 wins with the remaining schedule of the Bears, the Texans, maybe without CJ Stroud. We'll see. The Jets and the Bengals. I think they're going to find a way to win 2 of those games, and they're going to make it into the playoffs, in my opinion. This is a big game for them today and a game that they needed quite a bit. Another game at 1:00 that really impacted the Bills that went our way. The New York Jets just beat down the Houston Texans. Unfortunately, CJ Stroud did get injured. Fantastic rookie who's been playing really, really well. Got hit really hard, is being evaluated for a concussion. It certainly seems that he was concussed. That seemed to be the case. We'll see what comes out officially, but it was a really, really ugly hit, and there's no guarantees of how that is going to affect different people and what happens, but that's going to need to be watched closely. The Texans have upcoming games against the Titans, the Browns, the Titans, and the Colts. So a bunch of division games, very, very winnable. We just saw the loss by the Jaguars. The Texans are one game out in that division, but this is a really, really tough one for them to lose. The Jets doing the Bills a big favor, dropping the Texans back to 7-6 in a tie with the Bills. We'll see how the tiebreakers go. They currently are ahead in AFC conference wins, but the Texans have all conference games remaining. The Bills have multiple of those. They can get back to that point and be able to get ahead. So we'll see where that one goes, but certainly was in the Bills' favor. One that I guess in theory could have helped the Bills a little bit was the Ravens and the Rams. I guess just pulling the Ravens back into the mess a little bit further technically could have helped. I don't think this one really makes a big difference. Having the Ravens lock up that division, we'll see where the Browns go and what they're trying to qualify for. So I think it's going to be interesting to be able to see how those things come together. But I expect the Ravens to lock up that division. They played really well today. The Rams were in this game the entire time, took it to, obviously the game went into overtime. It was a walk-off punt return that similar to, unfortunately, when Xavier Gibson and the Jets beat the Bills in week one. This is our second walk-off punt return in the NFL this year in overtime. But the Ravens look like a tough team. They played well today, but the Rams are good, and I think the Rams are going to be in the playoff discussion in the NFC. That one's getting a little bit wonky. We'll see, where that goes. The loss today didn't help them, but they're sitting one game out. They're in the 8th seed. If the Packers lose on Monday night, that could pull them back in, and the Rams would be right there on the 7th seed. The Seahawks continue to lose. That's made that interesting. Obviously, somebody's going to win the NFC South, but nobody from that division looks like they're trying anything to be able to get a wild card. So that's going to be an interesting one to look at as we go a little bit further. Another game that I guess technically went the Bills' way was the Vikings beating the Raiders. The Raiders were already eliminated for all intents and purposes, but officially they could have rattled off wins and finished 10-7. Giving them their 8th loss does help. The win keeps the Vikings alive. Unfortunately, NFL sweetheart Josh Dobbs, his Cinderella story seems to have come to an end. They benched him during this game, brought in Nick Mullins, who didn't lead a touchdown drive, but at least drove them down for the game-winning field goal. This game was 3-0. Like, you just don't see that anymore. This game was indoors. This was not a weather-affected game. This was not a messy game. But it was somehow 3-0, and just unbelievable to think of that in today's NFL. An NFC game with no real effect on the Bills, but an interesting one on their playoff chase. The 49ers just kind of continued to pull away as this game went. The Seahawks scored early, had an early lead, but then the 49ers continued to pull away as they went, never really had it any closer than in the fourth quarter. There was a couple possessions where the Seahawks, if they could have put something together here, they lost Geno Smith late to sickness. Drew Lock was the starter here. I don't know that the game's terribly different if you see that, but obviously losing your starting quarterback late is never good. The 49ers continue to look like the buzzsaw that we've seen all season long, making fantastic plays over and over again. They look like the best team in the NFL right now. In a game that could have helped the Bills a little bit, the Chargers lost starting quarterback Justin Herbert during the game to a fractured index finger on his throwing hand. That one certainly does not look like it's going to be good for the Chargers. Many people were kind of rooting for the Chargers to upset some teams for the Bills down the stretch. Now it's looking like it's going to be tough for them to be able to have Justin Herbert. If he has a fractured index finger on his throwing hand at 5-8, I will be shocked if they continue to put him back out there, especially on the short rest. The Bills play the Chargers in 13 days. It'd be really interesting to see if he's ready to play in that game. Obviously, anytime you remove a quarterback like Justin Herbert, it completely changes the dynamic of what that team's capable of. Here, the Denver Broncos continue to find a way to put up wins. They get back on the winning track at 7-6. They are in a tiebreaker currently outside looking in, but one of the 6 teams tied at 7-6. Who wins those games down the stretch is going to decide it. They certainly have some games that will affect the Bills. They have the tiebreaker over the Bills with the head-to-head win, but they play at the Lions next week when we go to play with the playoff simulator. That's a really, really big one for the Bills, and I'll show you that when we play around with the New York Times simulator and what it shows. Any other games here? We have obviously the Cowboys and the Eagles going on right now. No real impact for the Bills there. The Cowboys are up 24-6 at halftime on the Eagles. A little bit shocking, but I don't mind the Cowboys coming in fat and happy, tied for their lead and with the best record in the NFC. I think that'll be a great way to see them come into Buffalo feeling really good about themselves. We have 2 games tomorrow night with the Packers and the Giants. No real impact for the Bills there. There is impact if the Titans could somehow upset the Dolphins. I certainly don't see that happening. I don't expect them to upset the Dolphins, but you can certainly root for it. That's what would be most helpful to the Bills. I don't expect that to happen, but we'll see where that one goes. So first, let's look at the overall standings as we talked about it here in the playoffs. The divisions are pretty clean right now in the AFC. The Chiefs have a 1-game lead over the Broncos, which is crazy to think about. The Jaguars now a 1-game lead over both the Colts and the Texans. That one's interesting, especially with the Jaguars loss today. 2-game lead in the NFC North, 2-game lead, 2.5-game lead, depending on the outcome here. Probably a 3-game lead for the Dolphins, assuming they beat the Titans tomorrow in the AFC East. That puts obviously the top 4 division winners up at the top here. The Browns is the only wild card team at 8-5, and then a 6-game log jam with the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, you see them at the bottom of those 6 teams right now. They're not winning a lot of the tiebreakers. They do have some AFC games to catch up here. A lot of those tiebreakers here are very, very close. So if we see some additional AFC losses from these teams and the Bills stack up some additional AFC wins with games like the Chargers and the Patriots, and obviously the opportunity in week 18 against the Dolphins, they can stack up some AFC wins there that can help here. So the Bills still need to keep winning, but these tiebreakers will sort themselves out. Each of these teams have some tough games. The Bills have to keep winning for any of this to matter, but they've now put themselves in position where if they win, they're going to be in. They don't have much of anything to worry about. And if they even lose one, they only need a couple things to go their way. So speaking of which, let's take a look at our friends over at the New York Times and their fun playoff simulator here. Right now, without changing anything, they've gone from down in the teens at like 12% up to 39% chance of making the playoffs. Again, if they simply win out and they win their 4 remaining games, they are at greater than 99% chance of making the playoffs. They're a virtual lock. If they simply lose one of the games, they are still at a 72% chance of making the playoffs. So looking at these games, as you go down through and look at the percentages, you can see the games that have a huge swing. If somehow the Titans were to upset the Dolphins, that would be a 9% improvement in the Bills' chances. If they were to win every game down the stretch, that would be able to make it where the Week 18 game could be for the AFC East and be for the division. You see a couple others here so next week, our rooting interests are real clean and easy in a handful of games. So obviously none are as important as just the Bills beating the Cowboys. That's the biggest one where no matter what the percentages, that's of course going to have the biggest impact on whether they make it or not. But let me take off some of these other games that haven't been played yet so we get back to our original starting point. You can see the percentages and how they play out. The biggest one. So we need to root for the Vikings to beat the Bengals. That's a 6% swing. Takes us from 36 up to 42. The Bears are similar. If the Bears could beat the Browns, that would be a 4%. If the Lions can beat the Broncos, that's a 7% increase. If the Titans can beat the Texans, which now if they're the CJ Stroud-less Texans and it's Davis Mills, that's much more possible. That's a 7%. None of them matter as much as the Bills. Obviously, the Bills winning is a huge, huge swing and something very, very important. We see a little bit here if the Ravens were to beat the Jaguars, but those are the biggest 4 is Titans beating the Texans, Lions beating the Broncos, Vikings beating the Bengals, Bears beating the Browns. I think the Lions beating the Broncos is very doable. The Lions coming off an ugly loss, feeling, pretty bad about themselves coming back home. I think that's a very doable game. Again, if CJ Stroud is out, the Titans being able to win there, all those things are possible. This is a really, really fun and exciting view. The Bills have now gone from really having to hope and pray and needing a bunch of things to go their way to now at least if they win, they control their own destiny. If they win their remaining games, they are in. And even if they only win 3 out of their remaining 4, they have put themselves in a position where 70% of the time they still make it and they only need a couple of things to go their way. So again, this has been a lot of fun. we are going to be here all throughout the remainder of the season, each Sunday night at halftime, being able to go over the games with you. Maybe not Christmas. We'll figure out what we do that weekend of Christmas when we want to do this and go over the recaps. Maybe we'll do that one after, maybe Christmas Day night, maybe Monday night of that week. We'll figure out when we want to do those games, but we'll be here with you the rest of the time, having some fun, being able to go through all of this. But help us out. Give us a like, give us a rating, give us a review. This goes a whole long way. Connor, I will do my best to say hi. So hello, hi to Connor's dad. So we'll be excited to be able to go and have some fun here. Looking forward to more exciting games where we can play with math and be able to go out here. Marty asking, what about win out until week 18? Week 18, what's the swing of the Miami finale? There's a very good possibility. We need a loss for Miami. They have some other ones. They play the Ravens and the Cowboys. We need them to lose both of those games, but then we also need one more loss for it to really come into play, or the Bills to run the table. So if the Bills run the table and the Dolphins lose to the Ravens and Cowboys, week 18 will be for the AFC East, and that will be a lot of fun. So we need some of those things to happen, but I'm not quite sure whether that's worth counting on yet, but we'll continue to keep a look at it as we do these each week. All right, guys, thank you very, very much. On behalf of the fantastic producer, Chris Seth, you've been listening to Greg Thompson on the Greg Thompson Sports Show, and we are out.